Hi, my name is Jake, and I am a bookish drummer. So in this video, I want to discuss main characters that are actually the best character. A lot of the times when you read a book or a series, the main character isn't necessarily the best character. Oftentimes the author can purposely make the character bland or uninteresting so that the reader can just put themselves in their shoes. Or in other words, they can insert themselves into the story. And oftentimes you find secondary or even side characters more interesting and more compelling than the actual main character. And I'll go ahead and use Harry Potter as just an easy example. Harry Potter, the main character, can be a bit bland and uninteresting, but then there's characters, side characters, like Hagrid or Dobby, or even someone like Malfoy or Snape, who are way more interesting and way more fun to read about than Harry Potter. But in some instances, at least for me, myself, these books that I'm going to talk about all have very compelling main characters. And for me, in the books and series that I'm going to mention here, they're actually the best character in the book. And they're a standout character for me. Whereas the side characters, even though they can be good, they don't quite live up to the main character. So enough of the preamble, let's jump right into it. So the first main character I have to talk about is from the Dresden Files, and the main character is Harry Dresden, who, for my money, is the main reason why I go back to that series over and over again, is because of Harry Dresden. And this makes more sense, right? Because the story is written from his perspective, his first-person perspective, so his personality is definitely more on display. And the entire story is basically told from his eyes, so you really get to see how he reacts to everything, all the craziness that goes on in those books. And the other characters in the series, they are great, but clearly I think Harry Dresden is the standout character in that series. Which again, it's called the Dresden Files, so it makes sense. And just his whole character arc, where he starts out in the first couple of books up to the point where I think I've read the first 13 or 14 books, where he's at that point, is just an amazing journey to see. I think in general, people will definitely agree with me on a lot of these, but if you happen to not agree with me, I'd love to have a chat about it in the comments. So please feel free to do so. Another main character that I think is clearly a standout character in the series would be Hercule Poirot in all of the Hercule Poirot books. Without him, they wouldn't be as good as they are. He's just simply one of the best, detectives ever written, and his books are great because he's in them. And there's also a few Poirot books where he's not the main focus and he's actually absent for the majority of the book. Oftentimes, those can be my least favorite Poirot books. The best ones are when he's introduced very early on and he basically interviews or talks to a bunch of different people, and you get his interaction between all of these people. That's why I love them so much. And just the endings of his books, where he goes on his huge rants about who done it and how they did it and how he gathered the information, is always great. So yeah, the best character in the Hercule Poirot books is Hercule Poirot. Here's one that I'm interested in getting people's opinions on because it's a very popular fantasy series. I myself think it's slightly overrated. I'm talking about Mistborn by Brandon Sanderson, and clearly Vin, the main character, is the best character in the series. Come on. And like I said, I definitely have an unpopular opinion when it comes to this series. I think it's slightly overrated. I love the first book, but then the sequels, the second and the third book, I'm not a huge fan of. But even in those books where I have some major issues with, I still love Vin as a character, and she, for me, propels the story forward. She's a very well written, very nuanced, just female fantasy protagonist, and you don't often get that, especially, around the time this book was written. And especially in this first book, where half of the book is written from her perspective, like she is the main focus for me for this book, and I think clearly she's the best character. And I'm very interested to see what people think about that. Do they agree with me, or do they think that someone else from the series is the best character? And also for me, I'm just not a huge fan of the side characters, like the gang that she joins and all of the side characters and the crew. Like, a lot of them just aren't standout characters, and honestly, I don't remember much about them. Like, there's a guy named Ham, there's a guy named Breeze, there's a guy named Spook, and Sazed is pretty good, but other than that, like all those people I mentioned, I don't care about at all. And she was definitely one of the characters that I first thought about when I came up with the idea, because when I think about this series, the main person that I actually latch onto in the series is Vin, and everyone else I kind of forget about. So yeah, in Mistborn, in the original Mistborn trilogy, Vin, I feel like, is the best character, and she is the main character. With this next book and the next series I'm going to talk about, it's a little cheating because it's kind of a character duo, but I mean, you can't really have one without the other. And I'm, of course, talking about Loch and John from The Lies of Locke Lamora and the Gentleman Bastards series by Scott Lynch. Loch and John are clearly the two best characters in this series. And I mean, there's not much I have to say. I don't think anyone would disagree with me on that at all, and I would be shocked. They just work so well together, and they're hilarious, and the schemes that they go through are incredible, and quite frankly, the other characters that are in this book, while they are good and they're well written, they can never live up to Loch and John. Come on. And this was also another easy decision when I first came up with the idea. Loch and John, lock it up. Another really easy pick for me would be Rin from the Poppy War series. She's the main character. We get all of the story, or at least I'll say like 99% of the story, through her perspective, and clearly, for me, she is the best character in the books. And while there are fantastic side characters as well, for me, they can never live up to Rin. Rin is quite possibly one of my all-time favorite fantasy protagonists. And I know a lot of people don't like her, and they find her annoying, or they find her character very frustrating, but I feel like that's what makes her compelling. If we just had a boring character, who did amazing things, and then I'm not sure what I'm trying to say here, but she's just so compelling. She is compelling because she is flawed, and she is frustrating, and she keeps sort of making the same mistakes over and over again. But it's just such a good character study, and she just has... I guess what I'm just trying to say is that I love Rin, and the series clearly wouldn't be as good without her, which the series is about her, so yeah, she's the best character. This next pick for this next fantasy series, I will be interested to see if anyone disagrees with me. I feel like this is a pretty popular opinion, but I could see it going either way, and that would be Geralt from the Witcher series. I could see people liking maybe Dandelion or Ciri as much or even more than Geralt. Probably not Yennefer. she gets a lot of hate. But for me, the main reason why I love the series is Geralt. Geralt is awesome. And for me especially, because I love short stories and short story collections, and basically the introduction to the series, you get The Last Wish and Sword of Destiny, and all of the stories are from his perspective, and they're just so much fun. They have such great endings, and they're all from Geralt's perspective. And then by the time you get to the series, he starts introducing more character perspectives, and a lot of the times it kind of, well, not severely, but it can suffer not having it told from his eyes. I also think that's why the third book in the series, Baptism of Fire, a lot of people love that book because you get a lot of Geralt, whereas in some of the other books, you get less and less of him. You start to get more maybe Ciri or Yennefer. But yeah, definitely Geralt, I feel like, is the best character in this series. Not by a long shot, because I do really like Dandelion, Ciri, and Yennefer. But if I had to pick one, it would be Geralt, and he's basically the main character. This next series is a little more underground. Not a lot of people have heard of this series or have read it, but one of my all-time favorite fantasy books is The 12 Kings in Sherikai by Bradley P. Bulio, and the main character in this is Cheda, and I feel like she is the best character in the series. And like I said, she's also the main character. And it's definitely an instance where she gets most of the chapters in this book. Most of the book is told through her perspective. So you do get to spend a lot of time with the character, both in present day and in flashbacks to when she was a child. And I do think for anyone who's new to the series, or if they're thinking about reading this book, I think if they latch on quickly to Cheda, then they're going to love the series. And if they're not a huge fan of her, they probably won't like the rest of it. But for me, I love Cheda, and I think she's easily the best character in the series. This next book is a part of a horror series, and a lot of the times when it comes to horror books, the main characters aren't that compelling, and a lot of the times the main villains, or maybe like the monster character, is more interesting. But for this book, they're kind of one and the same, and that would be Joe Goldberg from Caroline Kepnes's Joe Goldberg series, with the first book being You. And it's very interesting because Joe Goldberg is definitely a pretty terrible person. The things that he does in this book, basically he's a stalker, and he's basically willing to do anything to get into this woman's life. But at the same time, you're kind of rooting for him in a weird way, because he's surrounded by just not terrible people as in the fact that they do illegal things, but they're just so annoying and just dumb, and you hate them. But, they're pretty much normal people, and Joe Goldberg is crazy and should probably be in jail. So yeah, definitely for sure, Joe Goldberg is the best character in the series, by far. So I think that's all I have to talk about in this video. Let me know down in the comments if you agree with any of these picks, or if you don't, or if you can think of any more. Leave them down in the comments below. Also, I'm thinking about doing this kind of same concept, but with Stephen King books. Stephen King main characters that are actually the best characters. I'll have to really sit down and think about that one. And then on the flip side, I also want to make a subsequent video where I talk about books or series with better side characters than main characters. That'll be interesting, hopefully, and hopefully you guys enjoy it. But anyway, if you liked the video, please give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing to my channel. Thank you so much for watching, and have a terrific day.